There are all types of startups. So there are family business startups, small startups. There are startups that will grow to a mid-size but never go beyond that. And then there are the startups that I work with. And those are venture fundable startups. And they have very specific criteria. You literally have to start a company that is going to grow exponentially over the next several years. That is what venture capital is looking for. So those are the startups we focus on. They can be technology based. A lot of them use new technologies, but not necessarily. You don't have to have a technology to scale like that, although it does make it easier. Yeah, so I like to say for most startups, technology opens a new door, a new opportunity to do something different or do something much better than it's been done before. But the technology isn't what you're selling. Like, people don't buy technology, they buy solutions. They buy your customer don't care what technology you use. They care what can you do for them? How can you make their business better? How can you make their lives better? So that's really what we look for as venture capitalists. So when I work with entrepreneurs, I actually do something very different, especially at the early stage than most people think of. So most people say, start with an idea. I'm not going to start my company until I have that brilliant insight, that brilliant idea that's going to change the world. Well, honestly, usually what's in the entrepreneur's head at the beginning is totally wrong, or it's partially right, but they don't know because they haven't taken it out into the world and they haven't gathered feedback and real data. So it really, honestly, for entrepreneurs, I tell them, don't worry about the idea at the beginning. Like, doing a startup is a process of discovery. It's actually the process at the beginning of discovering what the right idea is, what are all the elements you as an entrepreneur need to put together to get this business going and to prove it out. So when you're beginning your company, pick a direction, an area that you're interested in exploring. It's much better this way because a lot of times when you pick an idea, you lock yourself into that idea. You convince yourself, because you have to, you're taking a big risk. You might be quitting your day job, borrowing money. You convince yourself that this idea is great. And as soon as you convince yourself that something's great, most people have confirmation bias. So they want to only look at the data that reinforces that belief that this is great. And then they get going, but they're going usually not on the right path. And that can lead to failure. If you say to yourself, I don't care about having one idea, I'm going to have a lot of ideas, but I'm really interested in this area. I'm interested in how technology and the fishing industry can work together to, increase yields, decrease, other, environmental problems and depletion of fishing. Let's just say that's the area you want to work in. You don't have to have a specific idea. Then you start to go deep in that. You figure out what are all the problems, what do people need, what are real solutions, what can technology do? And along the way, you may come up with dozens of ideas, which is great, and you start to test each one out. That is what I like entrepreneurs to do. But when Google started, they didn't start with the right idea. They actually, Google was the founders of Google, Larry Page and Sergey Brin, thought they were building a nonprofit because they thought they were building a search engine for academic research papers, which is a very small market, just for professors. But then they discovered, no, we could actually apply this to almost any search on the internet. Same thing with Groupon. When they started, it was a site for doing social good. But then their users on the site started to use the features to actually get discounts on products. And on and on and on. You look at all these different startups, they were started with one idea and then they ended up as a totally different idea. But I also mentor lots of entrepreneurs all around the world, hundreds of them. And when I work with the teams, I can see the difference. I see some teams and they're not a very good team. They're not the right team, but they have a great idea. Almost always that team fails. They bungle the execution. They cannot get all the pieces going. However, a lot of times I'll work with really good people who really don't have a great idea at the beginning. They're fumbling around, they don't know what to do, but they're really smart, dedicated, thoughtful, and they have the right skill sets. Eventually, they usually figure it out. They just keep iterating and trying and iterating and trying, and eventually they hit on something and boom, they go. So I will always bet on the right people over the right idea or product, always. So we like to say in Silicon Valley, you're a lifestyle business, which means you can make some money on the side, improve your lifestyle, but you're not going to become a big business. And that happens all the time. The majority of ideas people have, they're small or medium size at best. They're lucky if they get to medium size. They aren't these big scalable things. And that's why these companies that really take off, these unicorns, are worth so much, because they're hard to come up with. They're not easy. Now, the criteria is relatively simple when you're analyzing your business. You have to look at, how many customers are out there? How big is the market? What is my position in the market? Are there lots of competitors already filling the market? And am I literally just like them, but maybe with a few features or other, things different, but nothing fundamentally different? Is there an ability for me to offer a core value to these customers that they're not getting already from the marketplace? These elements define whether a startup is going to be a lifestyle business or a big business. And then the other thing is scalability. How can I scale this? Some businesses are really difficult to scale because they require a lot of people, a lot of time, like consulting businesses. There are big consulting companies, but they're few and far between. And most consultants are just, solo entrepreneurs, or, they work with a couple other consultants. They just are very difficult to scale. And as a venture investor, I'm not going to bet on those. I'm going to bet on something that's easy to scale, meaning you can build a product, you can take it to the customer, and then you can basically replicate that over and over and over again with other customers. And this is where technology startups really shine, because if you have an internet-based business, literally you can build it once and then deploy it everywhere on the globe to all sorts of different customers. So when we're looking at a business, you have to look at what's in the entrepreneur's head, who are they, and these basic criteria for how big that business can become. A mistake a lot of entrepreneurs make is they try to go for capital too early. So especially when you're talking to venture investors, they want to see tangible proof that you have something. They may be called venture capitalists, but honestly, they aren't that adventurous. Nobody wants to lose their money. So in order to hook one of these investors, you have to show them something that they can extrapolate from and say, there's something real here. Like, these people have really figured out something. They're not just talking, right? Because anybody can talk. We meet a lot of people who can put on a great talk. But if you're a smart investor and you've been in the space for a while, you are literally going to look very closely at the business. And so with companies, you can raise angel funding with a business plan and a great idea. But angel funding, small amounts of angel funding, $100K, $150K or so, you can do that. Angels will often take a risk. But when you get into real investors who are going to put in real money and are experienced, what they want to see is validation from your customer. So that means some sort of proof. Are your customers ready to place orders? Have they placed any orders? I mean, that's great. How many of these customers out there are placing orders, or have you talked to? The more, the better. If you can't get your customers to place an order or commit to an order, can you get them to give you feedback on the product, try the product? Can they write a letter of intent at least that they're going to do it? A lot of times I tell entrepreneurs, it depends what your product is. If it's a B2B product, it's easy. You're going B2B, go to those businesses and talk to them. Even if you have to bring a video camera and record them as you're doing your pitch, their feedback, what they're thinking, do that, because that's proof. You can show investors if the businesses are super excited, like, oh my God, I gotta have this. When is it ready? Get it to me. Capture that. If it's a consumer product, you sort of have to let them use it, build an early prototype, put it out there. If you can't afford to do that, there's sites like Kickstarter and Indiegogo, crowdfunding sites. You can put it up there, create a great video. A lot of startups have, like Oculus literally went through the roof putting out their VR video, raising tens of millions of dollars and then getting sold before they ever launched their product for $3 billion to Facebook, all on a video. But they got proof from community out there and excitement, the media, everything else, that this was potentially something for the future. So That's what I tell you. Get out there, get as much proof from as many sources as possible, and that's what investors want to see. They don't want to see just a shiny business plan. You have to be, as an entrepreneur, very careful because it's really risky. Like over 90% of startups fail. That's just a fact out there. I write a lot about this. When you go to your family and friends to borrow money, which is what most entrepreneurs have to do because they don't have enough money, be cognizant of what you're asking them. You're asking them to take a risk where 90% chance they're not going to get their money back. If it's your parents and they don't care and they love you no matter what, yeah, you could take their money. But, if it's Uncle Joe or your best friend, you lose their money, that relationship may never be the same. And more often than not, it's not the same. So I tell entrepreneurs at the very beginning, if it's your first startup and you're probably going to fail, do not pick an idea that you need a lot of money for. Pick an idea that you can do with sweat equity, like you can do with your time and other people's time. People that you can get to commit, to join you because they believe in you, because they believe in the direction you're headed, and they want to do a startup. Those are the best startups. If you're doing anything else, you're really gambling a lot. You're gambling with your own money, maybe your life savings, and you do not want to risk the relationships of the people you really care about. Because if your company doesn't work out, that's when those relationships are strained, but that's when you need your family and friends the most. You need their support. So I'm telling you, I've done a lot of startups. I never took a penny from family and friends. And I know a lot of people do, and we always read the success stories. We just don't read the non-success stories. Nobody wants to talk about that their relatives won't speak to them anymore. Their friends have, disowned them and all this stuff because they lost all their money. People, everybody thinks they're going to get rich. These are internet startups. People think that they read about it. They don't have a realistic expectation that they're going to fail. They think it's going to be the next Google and Facebook and you're going to make them rich. And when you end up losing all their money, they can't help but feel like you tricked them or something's wrong. You don't want to be in that position. I like to say, if you can't raise money from an experienced angel investor who knows what they're doing, who knows the risks, maybe you shouldn't be raising money. Maybe just shift your idea to do something that you can do yourself. You can get started. A lot of great businesses are started by people just putting in sweat equity and a little bit of money. And a lot of them are started by people who have full-time or part-time jobs. So they haven't totally left their jobs. They're doing this on the side. They keep iterating, trying new things. That's a much safer way to do it and a much, I think, healthier way to approach starting a business. I like to tell entrepreneurs that when you are raising money from family and friends, just tell them, look, 90% of startups fail, you're not getting your money back. If you want to give me your money and maybe you're going to Vegas right now, you are giving me your money and putting it down on a roulette wheel with a 90% chance you won't get a payoff and a 10% chance you'll get a payoff and maybe a 1% chance you'll get super, this incredible, riches. This is a slot machine for, don't expect more. They understand that going into it, you will be much better off if things don't work out. 90% is a number derived. It's out there in a lot of different validated sources, but it's really derived from the idea stage, right? A lot of people have ideas early on. They try something, they raise a little money, they put in time, and then they walk away from it. So most of those, you don't hear about them, but they just fail all the time. But the reason it's 90% is because it's hard, right? Doing a business is hard for a lot of reasons. And entrepreneurs make a lot of mistakes. I'll tell you, being an entrepreneur and having gone through this myself, I know. I did companies that were successful. My first company was very successful. It was a bootstrap company. I produced all these games that I coded myself, did very well. My second company was also very successful at first, but then things that are totally out of control come along and can slam you. You know, the dot-com bubble burst at the time. And literally it took down me and like a lot of other companies, you know, that may have done fine if that huge implosion hadn't happened. So these market changes, they're just things that are totally out of your control that you can't foresee. And startups are fragile. Like, they are fragile. Like, it doesn't take a lot to kill a startup. Honestly, when you're running on fumes, when you have very little money and very few resources, you know, one hiccup along the way that might not, for a larger company, they're like, oh, this project didn't work out. But for a startup, you're dead. Like, you literally, you have to start over. So that's why it's the 90% number. My personal experience of living through the dot-com bubble, you know, we were doing great. We had this company called Spider Dance. We had a huge number of media partners. I mean, we were partnered with NBC, Time Warner, Viacom, you know, Turner Broadcasting, all Game Show Network, all these big companies were using our products and services, literally paying us money, and we were growing our business. We were number one in the space. We had a buyout offer from a public company. We could have sold. Our investors like, no, you're crazy to sell now. You guys are number one. Keep going. And then all of a sudden, you know, literally the floor dropped out from under us. The market just went away. When the dot-com bubble crashed, all the big media companies that were our customers literally looked at their spending, because their advertising revenue plummeted at the same time, looked at their spending, and then they cut out everything that wasn't essential. And that meant all experimental projects. And we were doing an interactive TV platform, like where you'd run a game show online and it would be on air at the same time, and you'd play along synchronously. Literally, they were like, this is a nice to have, but it's not a necessity. And so, like, NBC was one of our biggest customers. We were doing their show Weakest Link. NBCI, their interactive group at the time, when we signed up with them, had 250 people on board, like working. Literally, after the dot-com bubble burst, they were 3 people. 3 people, like, for running the whole NBCI at that time. They literally decimated it. And then they look at us, a third-party vendor, right, providing a service, and they're like, you can do this, and you can sell the advertising. They were selling the advertising for us and paying us. They're like, we're not going to pay you anything. You sell the advertising, this interactive advertising, which was a new thing at the time. And we were like, we're not equipped to do that. Like, and it was just the revenue went to zero, like literally overnight. And what can you do? We had debts out, we had loans, you know, to fuel our company, venture debt. We couldn't sustain it. We didn't go bankrupt. I cut a deal with our creditors and literally gave them our technology in exchange for them forgiving our debt so that we could quietly close our doors. That was the best solution I could come up with. But they were also in bankruptcy because they had lent too much money to too many startups. It's a bloodbath at that time. Valuation today, especially in hotbeds like Silicon Valley, Israel, New York, Beijing, places like that, they are through the roof for successful startups. I mean, if a startup is hot, like, their valuations are sky high. So I'm an angel investor. I work with lots of other angel investors to help early stage startups. We're looking at the numbers and we're like, wow, like, at this valuation coming in, even if the company's really successful, we're only going to get a 4x return. Is that worth the risk for an early stage unproven startup? And often the answer is no. Like, it's not worth the risk. You're seeing it right now. There's a bit of a pullback on the public markets because valuations for tech companies have been so high. We've been living through a big boom. And there's always cycles, ups and downs. Still, like right now in Silicon Valley, if you have a startup and you're hot, if you're not, it's kind of binary. If you're kind of on the in track and you're hot and people are talking about you, you can literally command your valuation. And like the valuations for early stage startups are, what used to be a $5 million valuation is now a $20 million valuation. If that gives you any idea. So like 5 million pre-money is now 20 million pre-money. So it's like 4 times higher than kind of the traditional average. And I'll tell you, you have to be very selective as an investor. It's a great time if you're a hot startup. If you're not a hot startup, it's still tough. Like, don't fool yourself. Like, it's never easy if you're not hot. There's always something. But valuations are really dictated more than anything by the market itself. It's literally how many investors, how much capital is there out there? And look, interest rates are at like near zero. The Fed's pushed them down. There's a ton of liquidity in the market, a ton of capital, and it's chasing returns. And that is it's not just driving up startups. It's been driving up stocks. It's been driving up SPACs, the whole SPAC trend that's kind of imploded a little, but still there. And, Bitcoin and these cryptocurrencies, it's been a little crazy. And we're probably, to make this long-term sustainable, going to have to get back to a more normal number. Investors, like myself, love recurring revenue. Like, recurring revenue is the holy grail. And let me tell you why. So SaaS companies have been hot for a long time. They're not just a fad. They've been around. They've been doing really well. And the reason is because especially when you have business customers, it's a B2B marketplace and they're paying you, or even B2C if you have a SaaS that can command us. A lot of them are blends, B2B and B2C. The idea is you can pretty much predict the revenue. So what we like, I said, and I'll say it again, venture capitalists are not that adventurous. They want a sure bet. And when they can predict the revenue, when they can look out and say, look, we know this company's earning this much. These people have bought in annual or monthly subscription plans. We can kind of estimate out what they'll be paying. We're looking at the current growth rate, the customer acquisition costs. We can determine, like, if we give you money, you can go out and acquire customers and their lifetime value will be significantly more than you are spending to acquire them. This is a good risk. In fact, it's a no-brainer, right? If there's a big market out there, there's a lot of untapped customers, and you've already shown that you are offering real value to these customers, SaaS is a beautiful model because it's so easy to analyze, whereas a lot of other businesses are much harder to decipher. You're launching a new technology, your consumer base, we don't know if it'll take off. Even when a SaaS product is small, if it's got traction, if it's going, if customers are paying, you can start to extrapolate out and make very accurate predictions, and that's why we love it. Recurring revenue. It's really important to be able to invest in a company where if somebody gets sick, if somebody has a family issue, if somebody just quits, the whole company doesn't fall apart. They aren't the linchpin keeping it all together and then it just disintegrates. As an investor, this is a big concern of mine. But we also look for CEOs especially that have some magic to them, some charisma, some ability to communicate their message and their vision. Like, you could imagine, what is Tesla or SpaceX without Elon Musk? Like, Elon Musk, has driven those companies. What is Facebook without Mark Zuckerberg? What is Microsoft without Bill Gates? These people have something special about them. So there's always a push and a pull between that. We don't want somebody who's just bland, who is replaceable. We do want that special person who can add a lot of value to the company. So we would always gravitate towards that. At the same time, no single person has built $1 billion company. Like, they may take all the credit for it. Like, Elon Musk may take all the credit for it, but honestly, he didn't found Tesla. He was just an investor who took it over and took it to new heights. Granted, he did an amazing job, but he didn't start that company. Not one person doesn't do this. The quality of an organization is based on the processes they put in place and really important, the people they put in place from the very beginning. So, like, as an entrepreneur, I look at early stage startups and they're not going to have a lot of processes, right? Because they're just figuring things out. But I can judge the quality of the CEO based on the people that CEO is surrounded by. So if the CEO is surrounded by really amazing people, like they pulled people who could be working at Microsoft or Google or any other big company earning a 6-figure salary, yet these people have quit those jobs to join this startup and make it a success, well, that is evidence to me that this person has something, that they know how to attract people, especially when they don't have a lot of money. It's really hard, right? Then they must have some magic to them, but they also have the organizational wits to bring in and make these people comfortable, because you need a top management team. The CEO is just going to be the figurehead, like at the top of the pyramid. You need all those people under the pyramid, and you need to see that from the very beginning. I often tell entrepreneurs, and this is something really interesting. I say, when you begin your process of building your company, don't spend all your time trying to think of that great idea. Don't spend all your time trying to build the prototype or build the early product. Don't even spend time going after customers right away. The first thing I want you to do is think about the other people you want to work with. What space are you in, and who do you need to actually build a business together? Can you bring those people on board? Once you get those people, everything else becomes easier. Like, engaging with the customers, building the prototypes, going out and raising capital becomes so much easier. So put 80% of your time up front into just finding the people. It's a lot of work. Like, finding mediocre people, fairly easy. You can pull them anywhere. Finding exceptional people, incredibly hard. You will have to put a lot of time into this, who are passionate about it, who are willing to commit to it like you, who see the opportunity, and bringing them in early. If you can do that, your chances of success go up so much. And then to your question, process, put processes in place. You as the CEO don't have to put them all in place. What you have to do is go to your team. If you have an exceptional team, and say, what can we do to make this company function really well? What are the processes we need to put in place so that when, if I'm out, on traveling, this thing you don't need to come to me. You guys can run the show. When you do this, that is the point when you're really building a great organization. Everybody calls themselves startups until they either get acquired or go public. Literally, it doesn't matter. They're all the way on they're pre-IPO. They're still a startup, as long as they're in the private markets. So today the term is very flexible. When I work with startups, and what I wrote the book for, as I didn't write the book for companies that are already unicorns. If you're running a unicorn today, you probably don't need my book. You're probably on your way. But if you aren't running a unicorn, anywhere up to becoming a unicorn, those are the startups that I think are still at risk and really need help understanding what other entrepreneurs have done to actually build their businesses and get around all these, literally, every time I ran a startup, and I work with entrepreneurs, every single day there's something that's urgent that you have to do that feels like if you don't do it, everything is at stake. When you're in that mode, that's when, surviving a startup is really important, because you have to deal with those on multiple levels. I hope you enjoyed the talk. If you liked it, share it with your friends or subscribe to our channel. You can also come to founderspace.com and check out our 3-month online startup program, as well as my books, Make Elephants Fly, Surviving a Startup, and The 5 Forces. I'm also available on all the major social networks. Just search for Founderspace.